So today I'm going to talk about the game the Ythri from Metagaming Concepts in 1975. It's, obviously one of the earlier games and it's innovative. The design is by Howard Thompson and artist is Winchell Chung. Comes in a plastic sleeve, and so this effectively is the cover of the game, which is also the cover of the rule book. There's another version too, second version, which has color to it. I like the art. It's very, very unique. Did a really good job with that. It doesn't really bother me that this version, which is version 1, isn't in color, because it kind of sets the theme and expectations for the rest of the game. Obviously, as you see, the components are very basic, given it's 1975. But it's a very well done sketch. And it kind of ties it all together as far as the kind of the simplicity of the appearance, yet in its own way it's fairly elegant as well as how the sketch is here. Various ships. I assume this is the planet Avalon. Various combat and some stars in the background. I think the art's very well done. In a lot of these early games often come with these like insert advertisements. This one's a little bit unique, and then it's got advertisements of their games, etc. But it also is effectively a one-page insert describing the game as well. Avalon didn't want to fight, but that didn't mean it couldn't. As the Terran Empire found out the hard way when it tried to invade, they had underestimated the Ythri. So the concept my understanding for the book is that there's the Earth, the Terran descended race, and then there's another race descended. They're like a wing species, and they live together in Avalon, and then a conflict with the Empire arises and they have to choose sides, basically. So again, it's based on Paul Anderson's Hugo Award nominated novel, The People of the Wind. This game of invasion from space planetary combat for 2 to 4 players can turn any science fiction fan into a wargamer and vice versa. It's always great when these games are based on actual novels that are well received. Hood's Rules Booklet, 14 by 17 in space map, 17 by 18 inch Avalon map, 242 perforated counters, combat results tables. And then here it shows a bit about the game mechanics. There's space movement and combat, and then there's ground movement and combat. As far as components then, there's of course the rule book, which is 16 pages. Black and white, a lot of good examples in there. Mine's a little bit marked up as far as items being underscored, etc. Pretty basic and representative of its time. And then there's some also rules edition supplement here. Like an insert. Space combat table. Planetary combat tables. And obviously it's an early game, so nobody's going to be getting it for the detail and quality of the components. The counters, there's 242 of them, extremely basic. There's yellow for the Terran player, and then blue for the Ythri. The color contrast is okay, but the the half inch by half inch, they're thinner than usual counters, one-sided, kind of a thinnish cardboard. But my opinion, it's good that they're consistent as far as the detail on each item, maps and counters, etc. So they're all kind of at the same level. So that's okay. So that's all the counters. So both the Terran and Ythri have both space counters and ground and planetary combat counters. Some of them are consistent across the two, and then some are unique. First of all, there's a supernova class, which is niche. And the space counters, and these are warships, space counters have the maximum weapon range, and the maximum movement allowance in hexes per movement turn. You have the supernova class, and you see they have a couple different levels. Planet class cruisers, transports, kind of different. One unique one for the Ythri, but the Terran Empire has got several different ones. So it's the on the left is the number of units by type. Transport carries. 3AT shows carriers. Shows it carries 3 atmospheric units, for instance. And the ship class. And then again the movement allowance. And there's Guardian satellites, which orbit Avalon Empire weapons. They orbit 4 hexes up from Avalon, moving counterclockwise 3 hexes every status update event. They have a weapon range in hexes and movement allowance in hexes, 4 and 3. You can see they're kind of offset to the numbers as well. And Morgana, which is Avalon's moon, orbits Avalon 7 hexes out. It moves 3 hexes clockwise every status update event. And then there's the optional rules. There's also ground energy projectors. Again, it has the range, and this one's got combat defensive strength. And then planetary combat counters. There's 3 types: balance troops, Ythri militia and atmospheric units. Avalon base hexes may also participate in combat. Per permanent features Avalon map. Planetary combat units are carried aboard transports until debarked into Avalon. They do not enter play and need not be used until debarked. Send atmospheric units, ATs. They have a combat strength and a movement allowance in megahexes. Atmospheric units move in megahexes, engage in combat. Atmospheric units are unaffected by terrain features. A few different levels of those for both types. Balanced troops move in small hexes, engage in combat. They are considered to be automatically destroyed if they had movement on a C hex. They must expend 2 of their movement allowance to enter a mountain hex and 1 to enter every other type of hex. So again, unit type, combat strength, movement allowance in small hexes, different levels of those for both. And then the Ythri militia. They must expend 2 of their movement allowance to enter a mountain hex and 1 to enter every other type of hex. Considered automatically destroyed if they had movement on a C hex. So again, combat strength and movement allowance in small hexes. Bounce troops and Ythri militia are referred to collectively as ground units. Bounce units are heavily armored airborne infantry, while Ythri militia units are wing powered, highly maneuverable and durable warriors of the Avalon shows. So there's a couple maps. There's the space map and the Avalon map, which Avalon is located here in the middle of the space map. Space map is 14 by 17. Avalon map is 17 by 18, and they're a thinnish, kind of cardstock. So space map, it's mainly a Planet X grid with planet Avalon in orbit for Morgana, in orbit for Guardian satellites. In Empire started areas depicted. While space combat movement of spaceships, Morgana, and Guardian satellites occur on this map. So Avalon consists of 7 shade hexes in the center of the map. They serve to fix Avalon's spatial alignment for debarkment of planetary combat units from transports. So you see the designated lettered areas around there. Guardian Satellite Orbit. The orbit for Guardian Satellite is represented by the dotted line 4 hexes out from Avalon. So out here. Guardian Satellites move counterclockwise along this dotted line orbit during the game. Morgana orbits out here. The orbit for Avalon's moon Morgana is represented by a dotted line 7 hexes out from Avalon. Morgana moves clockwise along this dotted line orbit during the game. Then the Avalon map depicts the surface of the planet Avalon. Combat for controlled planet surface occurs on the map during the game. So obviously there's the small hexes. All terrain features are linked to the small hex grid. Bounce troop and Ythri militia movement are computed in terms of small hexes. Then you have the mega hexes, which are 7 hexes surrounded by this thicker line. Mega hexes are used for determined movement of atmospheric units. C hexes, the blue. They affect movement of bounce troops and Ythri militia. Plains hexes, they're the white hexes. Brown hexes, small brown hexes, here. Represent rough, mountainous terrain. Bounce troops and Ythri militia must expend 2 of their movement allowance to enter a mountain hex. And then base hexes. And they have descriptions of the different areas of the planet, valleys and plains, etc. Base hexes, the small, pinkish red hexes represent Avalon City. 12th base hexes. The Empire player must capture 3 of the 5 base hexes to win the game. First number under the base name is the hemispheric defensive strength, and the second number, the ground defensive strength, intrinsic to the base. And there are certain small hexes around the edge of the Avalon map, containing letters A through F, C, B, A, etc. These lettered hexes are used as debarkment points for invading combat forces during the planetary debarkment event. The lettered hexes around the edge and Avalon represent the space map corresponding to the hex lettering pattern on the Avalon map. So these lettered hexes correspond to the lettered hexes up here on the space map. So overall, the components are, they're one of the first games out there, so I didn't know what they, for instance, aspired counters to look like or anything, but they're consistent in their level of detail. I think actually the map is fine. The colors are maybe a bit intense, but you have enough detail here to see what you're doing. It's very, very clean and well organized. Then I'll get into rules. Setup for play. The Ythri player selects the following counters to begin the game. 2 Supernova class dreadnoughts, 3 PC class cruisers, 10 total balance troop combat strength points, 14 total Ythri militia combat strength points, 12 total atmospheric combat strength points, 2 Guardian Satellite counters. The Ythri player places these in any hexes he chooses along the Guardian Satellite orbital track. They may not be placed in the same hex. Morgana. The Morgana counter is placed in any desired hex along the Morgana orbital track. The Terran Empire player begins the game with the following counters: 8 Supernova class dreadnoughts, 6 Planet class cruisers, 36 total BT combat strength points in space transports. Initially, only the transports are selected with the carrying capacity equal to the total BT combat strength allowed. 30 total AT combat strength points in space transports. Initially, only the transports are selected with a carrying capacity equal to the total AT combat strength allowed. The Ythri player must first places his spaceship counters in any hexes on the space map. No more than 3 ships per space hex. The Empire player places his ships next on hexes at either or both edges of the space map labeled for Empire player start. The Ythri player then places his Guardian satellite and Morgana on the respective orbital tracks. Last, the Ythri player places his bounced troop, Ythri militia, and atmospheric unit counters on the Avalon map. No more than 3 BT or YM counters per small hex, and no BT or YM counter is on a C hex. After all counters are placed, the Empire player begins the first game turn with his first player turn. The Terran player will first move his spaceships in executing the spaceship movement event. In the sequence of game events, play alternates between players, with each player going through the entire sequence of game events to complete his player turn. The game turn consists of each player having 1 player turn. The Empire player always moves first. 1. Spaceship movement event. The moving player moves his ships and designated targets for firing space combat. 2nd. Space combat event. All targets for firing which were designated during movement are resolved as combats. 3. Planetary debarkment event. The Empire player debarks atmospheric and balanced troop unit counters to the surface of Avalon. 4. Planetary movement event. A player moves all ground and atmospheric units he desires on the Avalon map. Combats are initiated when certain enemy units and movement on the same hex or megahex. 5. Planetary combat event. All combats initiated by movement are resolved by die rolls and reference to the Planetary Combat table. 6. Status update event. When all combats have been resolved, turn counting, orbital movement, and winning are accounted for. Spaceship movement event. Spaceships move from SpaceX to SpaceX on the space map, expanding their movement allowance to enter desired space hexes, and then change the ship's facing as desired and or allowed before moving into another hex. During warship's move, it may designate 1 target for firing. Movement. A player may move all, some, or none of his spaceship counters during the spaceship movement event. A player may have no more than 3 of his spaceship counters in the space hex at the end of his movement. Movement is controlled by movement allowance, ship facing, and spatial limitations of a space map. Spaceships possess a type of inertialess drive that puts them under movement control of the helm at all times. Their movement does not necessarily conform to the Einsteinian laws of motion of normal space, so for instance, acceleration, deceleration. Spatial limitations. A spaceship may not end its movement on a hex occupied by an enemy ship, on an Avalon hex, or off the map board. Spaceships in the same hex as Morgana or a Guardian satellite are not considered to have landed, but to be adjacent only. Facing. Each ship must always face a hex side as it moves across the map. A ship may change its facing after it enters the new hex. Its facing may change a number of hex sides equal to the number of movement allowance points expended to enter the hex. So there they show that basically costs more to turn, but you can't go backwards. Movement allowance. A ship expends part of that movement allowance to enter a new hex according to his facing in the hex is leaving. In the diagram, this in 4 or 5 could enter hex D with expenditure of 1 movement allowance and change its facing 1 hex side. It could enter C or E with 2 MA expended and changing 2 hex sides. B and F could be entered with 3 MA, and you change the facing with 3 hex sides. XA may not be entered. Designating space combat targets. During spaceship movement, a player may designate each of his warships as having fired on 1 target unit within range. Guardian satellites designate targets after all ships have moved. It may fire on 2 separate targets or twice on the same target. Space combat event occurs immediately after the designation of targets. A warship designates the target for firing subject to weapons range, firing arc, and facing. Facing for firing from hex is determined after the ship has changed facing, if it is going to change facing. Range is determined by counting from the first hex adjacent to the firing ship and counting the hex the target is in. A target must be in the eligible firing arc. Guardian satellites may fire in any direction with a range of 4 hexes. A ship may pass through an opposing target space hex and fire at it at 0 hex range. When more than 1 ship or unit is in a target space hex, the firing unit must designate the 1 ship or unit being targeted for firing. Space Combat Event. After targets for warships and guardian satellites have been designated during the spaceship movement event, combat results of designated firings are determined. Only warships and guardian satellites may engage in space combat. A warship may fire once and a guardian satellite twice, subject to range and firing arc limitations. When more than one ship or unit is in a targeted space hex, the firing unit must designate the one being targeted for firing. Firing arc. Warships may only fire on targets that lie within their firing arc and that lie within range. Guardian satellites may fire in any direction out to a maximum range of 4 hexes. The warship's range is printed in the lower left-hand corner of the spaceship counter. The firing arc is determined by the ship facing, after facing has been changed by the hex. The firing arc includes all hexes in an arc through the faced hex and its 2 adjacent hexes shown. So basically, looks like 120 degrees. Guardian satellites. Guardian satellites may fire in any direction to a range of 4 hexes. They may fire twice during a space combat event, twice at one target, or at 2 separate targets. Guardian satellites may fire on any Terran Empire ship in range, including those in the same hex as the GS, which are considered to be targets at a range 0. Combat results. Combat is resolved by rolling 1 die for each combat firing and consulting the space combat table. The table shows the die roll necessary to destroy the target by referencing the column, row intersection of the firing unit and target type. After the die is rolled for each combat, the destroyed unit counter is removed from the board. Planetary Debarkment Event. After all space combat has been resolved for its player turn, the Terran Empire player may debark atmospheric and planetary combat counters from transport spaceships to Avalon. Debarkment is accomplished by placing units the transport carries onto the appropriate hexes of the Avalon map and removing the transport counter from the space map. Transport is break into component landing units for landing on Avalon's surface. 1. Planetary combat units are carried only on transport spaceships. These units may debark on Avalon only when the transport ship is in a space hex directly adjacent to Avalon hexes in the space map. 2. The transport must be stopped movement in its movement turn on the hex directly adjacent to the Avalon hexes in order to be able to debark. Space hexes adjacent to Avalon are lettered A to F. Transport may debark forces only on Avalon map hexes that have the same letter in them as space hex occupied by the debarking transport. Atmospheric forces may debark in any megahex that has any small hex with the same letter as a space hex occupied by a debarking transport. Bounce troops may only debark in small hexes with the same letter as a space hex occupied by a debarking transport. Debark units may not move from hex to hex on the Avalon map during debarkment. They may move in the following planetary movement event of the Terran Empire player. Debark forces may not land on a small hex or megahex that they cannot legally move to during movement. If ground units land on the same hex as a Ythri unit, they may not move during the following movement event, and combat must be resolved the following planetary combat event. In some examples, the transport's in C-hex, so it must land units only on small and megahexes of the Avalon map that contain a C. In the other example, bounce units can land on any of the small C-hexes and the atmospheric units in any megahexes with small hexes containing Cs. In the planetary movement event. During the planetary movement event, players move bounce troops, Ythri militia, and atmospheric units. All units are considered to be moving simultaneously. Ground unit movement. Only bounce troops and Ythri militia are considered to be ground units. Ground units may move all, some, or none of their movement allowance each planetary movement event. A player may move none, some, or all of his ground units. Ground units may not end their movement on a C-hex. If they do, the unit is considered destroyed. Ground units expend one of their movement allowance to enter all small hexes, sub-mounted hexes, which require an expenditure of 2 MA to enter. Ground units may move into a small hex occupied by an enemy ground unit, but not through it. Moving to a small hex with an enemy ground unit initiates combat that is resolved in the next event, planetary combat event. Empire ground forces may not move into or through an Avalon city, Choth base hex, unless that base has been captured through combat. No units may move off the Avalon map. Also, no more than 3 ground unit combat counters of each player may be in a small hex at the end of the planetary movement event. So each player may have 3 counters there If there's 2 players there, then it could be a total of 6, 3 for each. Once combat counters are on Avalon, they may be organized into whatever combat strength denomination the player desires. Changes in the number of counters used to represent a combat strength must occur within 1 small hex during the movement event. Ground units are limited to changes within a small hex, but atmospheric units may change within a megahex. Similarly, combat strength equal to 12 AT in megahex might be represented by any combination of AT counters that equal 12 combat strength points. Then atmospheric unit movement. Atmospheric units are considered to be airborne for the duration of the game, moving from megahex to megahex. Atmospheric units are considered to be airborne for the entire megahex, not occupying any specific small hex. A player may move none, some, or all of the atmospheric units, all, part, or none of their movement allowance. Atmospheric units are not affected by any of the terrain features during movement. Atmospheric units may move into a megahex occupied by enemy atmospheric units, but their movement for that turn immediately ceases. Moving to a megahex with enemy atmospheric units will automatically cause combat in the following Planetary Combat event. There is no limit to the number of atmospheric unit counters that may be in a single megahex at the end of a Planetary Movement event. Planetary Combat event. After a player has completed his Planetary Movement event, he resolves combats which were initiated by movement of enemy units in the same hex or megahex. There is combat when enemy ground units occupy the same small hex, when enemy atmospheric units occupy the same megahex, or when unopposed atmospheric units opt to initiate attack on enemy ground units occupying a small hex of their megahex. Planetary combat is resolved by rolling a die for each separate combat and referencing the result on the Planetary Combat table. Results of combat are executed after all combats have been resolved for the current Planetary Combat event. No new combats result from movement of units caused by combat results. The player who initiated the combats by his just completed movement is the attacker and the other player is the defender. Terrain effects combat only for combat in Avalon City 12th base hexes. Enemy ground units occupying the same hex are computed as a separate combat with possible addition of atmospheric combat strength. Combat odds for each separate combat are computed by summing the combat strength of the attacking units, dividing them by the sum combat strength of the defending units. Resultant fraction is rounded down to the lowest odds shown. Combat between enemy atmospheric units must occur when they both occupy the same megahex. Atmospheric unit combat is resolved in the same manner as for ground units. The player with the most atmospheric combat strength is in a megahex may opt to assign any combat strength in excess of the weaker player's atmospheric combat strength to any combats between ground units and small hexes of the megahex. If there are enemy ground units and small hexes of the megahex not engaged combat, the player with the most atmospheric combat strength may likewise opt to assign the excess to initiate attack on such enemy units. Atmospheric combat strength are summed within a megahex only, each megahex being a separate combat area. When atmospheric units in megahex are unopposed by enemy atmospheric units in the same megahex, they may opt to attack enemy ground units in that megahex, or they may not attack. When the combat result calls for withdrawal, it does not apply to atmospheric units. Avalon City 12th base hexes are captured by destroying or forcing withdrawal of all defending units, and there's clarification of this in an insert which I'll go over. Defending units and all defending units and destroying the intrinsic defensive capacity of the base. Once captured, the base's intrinsic defensive capacity is considered destroyed for the rest of the game. The base has no effect in combats in it after it has once been captured. The ground defensive capacity of the base hex is used when it is attacked by ground units, and the atmospheric defensive capacity when it is attacked by atmospheric units. These defensive capacities are added to the combat strength of friendly ground units defending the base hex backed by the base hex. When combat results call for withdrawal of defending ground combat counters from base hex, they must withdraw. However, a withdrawal combat result causes no damage to the base hex. While attacking, ground combat counters must withdraw from a base hex if the combat results do not achieve capture. That means the defending ground units and intrinsic defensive capacity must be destroyed in the same combat. When defenders suffer a loss, it comes out of defending ground combat counters first, and then from the base hex. Since there are no replacement counters for a base, a record of its losses must be kept separately. and some examples. Then the status update event. The status update event is used for housekeeping of important game data at the end of every player turn. 1. Orbital Movement. After all combats resolved in the Planetary Combat event, Guardian satellites and Morgana are moved along their dotted line orbital tracks. Morgana is moved 3 hexes clockwise in the orbital track. Guardian satellites move 3 hexes counterclockwise along their orbital tracks. Turn counting. Players record the passage of player turns and game turns on a piece of scratch paper. Winning if the Terran Empire player has captured 3 of Avalon City Choth base hexes. Game's over. The winner is determined according to the rules in the winning rules section. Then this insert has clarifications of bases, etc., which would supersede anything conflicts before. So City Choth base atmospheric defense. The atmospheric defense factor of base is never destroyed. A base's atmospheric defense factor is used only when attacked by atmospheric units and supported by attacking ground units. A. When ground units alone or ground units and atmospheric units jointly attack a base, some detector combat strength is applied to the base's ground defense factor plus the combat strength of all defending ground and atmospheric units. The base's atmospheric defense factor is not used when a base is attacked by ground units. B. A base's atmospheric defense factor is destroyed only when the base is captured. Base's atmospheric defense factor is not destroyed in order for a base to be captured. C. A base is captured when its ground defense factor has been destroyed and the base hex has been occupied by attacking ground unit. At the end of a combat event, once captured, a base loses intrinsic atmospheric and ground defense for the remainder of the game. D. A base applies atmospheric defense to an attack when attacked by atmospheric units only. Ground defense factors do not apply unless the base is attacked by ground units. When the base suffers losses when attacked by only atmospheric units, the losses are subtracted from the base's ground defense factor or from defending ground units in the base hex at the option of the defender. And back to the main rules. Winning. The balance of factors in the Ythri will result in a variety of game lengths depending on the relative ability and playing style of opponents. Game ends when the Empire player has captured 3 of the City Choth base hexes. The extent of victory depends on how fast the Empire player accomplishes his goal, as shown below. So it ranges from type of victory, total Empire victory, and where the Empire player takes 12 turns to capture 3 bases, and it goes to draw no victor if it takes 15, and it's a total Ythri victory if it takes the Empire player 18 turns to capture 3 bases. Total victory or defeat is the goal in the optional Ythri, morale, and reinforcement rule, even though the Empire player is at a definite advantage. If you or your group find your playstyle favors one side or the other, feel free to devise your own measures of victory. Then a bunch of optional rules. Hidden movement. Hidden movement has the game begin with all spaceship counters and combat counters on the Avalon face down, so nothing of their type can be seen. Just back to the counters are the same color. They'll need to be marked to distinguish if they're Ythri or Empire. Counters. Spaceship, Guardian Satellite, Ground Energy Projector may turn over any enemy ship, Guardian Satellite, or Ground Energy Projector counter when it is within their weapons range at hexes. Counters must remain turned over as long as they move within weapons range of enemy units. They may revert to face down when they move out of the enemy unit weapons range. Bounced troops, Ythri militia, atmospheric unit, and ground energy protector counters are turned over whenever they're in mega hex with any enemy bounce troop, Ythri militia, atmospheric unit, or ground energy protector counter. They may be turned face down again when they enter mega hex unoccupied by any enemy units. Then ground energy protectors may be stationed on the lettered exterior mega hexes of Avalon or Morgana. When used, the Ythri player gets 3 and notes their location piece of paper. These locations are not revealed until a GP fires, until a Terran Empire combat unit enters the mega hex which is located, or an Empire ground unit enters the GP small hex. GPs in Morgana are not revealed until they fire. So on the left, on the counter, they have the space weapon firing range, and on the right, it's the combat defensive strength. A GP engaged in space combat in the same manner as Supernova class Dreadnought for determining combat results may fire only on spaceships and has a separate combat strength for ground defense. A GP on Morgana may fire at any ship up to 4 hexes away. A GP on Avalon is considered to be in the like-lettered hex of Avalon on space map and can fire at any ship up to 4 hexes away, counting on the intervening Avalon hexes. The GP's defensive combat strength of 3 applies only when it's an attack and is handled in combat the same as a city chuff base. Supernova step reduction. For added realism in space combat, Supernova class dreadnoughts may be destroyed in 2 steps, requiring 2 hits during space combat. The first time an SN-45 is hit by an enemy ship fired during space combat is replaced with the SN-23 counter instead of being removed from space map entirely. When an S-23 counter is hit by an enemy ship fire, a second hit actually is then considered destroyed and removed from the map. And then there's the optional role for Ythri morale and reinforcement. This optional role is actually a very basic game. It takes into account the divided support of the Avalonian Ythri shots for limited persecution of the war and a possible reinforcement move from the Ythri home system, Qualthan, or other areas of the domain. Ythri morale is actually an index that begins at 0 and is added to subtracted when certain events occur during the game. The index is adjusted for those changes every status update event. These additions and subtractions as follows. Shown here, so +1 for every game turn after 5 that the Empire has not debarked any combat units in Avalon. -1 for every Ythri SN destroyed. +1 for every Empire SN destroyed. -2 for every Guardian Sail destroyed. -3 for the first Empire captured base hex. -5 when the Empire has captured and held 2 base hexes. -7 when the Empire has captured and held 3 base hexes. -10 when the Empire has captured and held 4 bases. +2 for every YM-46 unit debarked from transport to Avalon. +2 for each time the Ythri forces to capture base X. +1 for every Terran Empire transport destroyed. -2 for every Ythri transport destroyed. For every game turn after 8 +1 for every game turn after 8 that the Empire has failed to capture base X. The index has the effect of causing Ythri militia units to disband or be created. The Ythri is lost or created where the Ythri player wishes. When the index reaches -5, the Ythri militia loses units equal to 2 combat strength points. When the index reaches -10, the Ythri militia loses units equal to 4 combat strength points. Which is -15, the Ythri militia loses units equal to 6 combat strength points. When it's +5, the Ythri militia gain units equal to 2 combat strength points. When it's +10, the Ythri militia gains units equal to 4 combat strength points. Reinforcement begins at the beginning of the 12th Ythri player turn when the Ythri player receives 3 more SN-45s and 3 transports Terran YM-5. These are placed on the hexes at either or both Empire start edges of the space map. In this variant, the game can concede total victory, control of all Avalon base hexes for either player. If the ground energy protector option is used in this variant, the Empire player should get an additional SN-45 and PC-27 for each GP. Then we'll get to 7 play. Student setup here. So first of all, the space map. The Ythri get 2 Supernova class dreadnoughts, 3 PC Planet class destroyers, and I put it anywhere on the map, and I've shown their orientation here. So the SNs are located in these positions, and the PCs are located here, kind of distributed around. Then you put Morgana on its orbital track, and you have 2 GSs that you'll put on their Guardian satellite orbit. And then the space units for the Terran player go on the board. They have 8 Supernova class dreadnoughts, 6 Planet class cruisers, total of 36 BT combat strength in space transports. So initially it's only transport selected with a carrying capacity equal to the total BT combat strength. And then 30 total AT combat strength points in space transports, selected with a carrying capacity equal to the total AT combat strength. And I distributed across the board. I had the warships going with the transports, basically PCs and SNs distributed across, coming in from each side. And the only optional rule I'm using is the one where it takes 2 hits to destroy a SN. So it'll start off, at the 4 or 5, and then replace it with a less powerful one once it's hit once. And then also in the setup, so the Ythri have some units that are starting on Avalon here. So they have 10 total balance troop combat strength points, and I have a 2, a 4, and a 4 kind of distributed. 14 total Ythri militia combat strength points. I have them on the bases. So a 2, 3, 2, 3, and 4. And then there's 12 total atmospheric unit combat strength points. Again, distributed, 1 on this island here, well, a group of 3 on the island, 3, 3, 3. And probably a minor point, just keep track of the turns. Instead of doing it in scratch paper, I'm just going to move this upside down counter along these hexes to keep track of the turns. Then we'll get into play. So in the Terran Empire, player goes first, movement. So we have, this is the range and then the movement allowance. What I'm going to do is move the warships in. I'll kind of keep the transports back and see if they can kind of clear up these guys. So I'll zoom in on how movement goes. It's a little unique how they do movement, because how much you can rotate in a hex is dependent on how many movement points you go to get in there. So he's got a range of 4 and a movement factor of 5. So he's going to spend 1 to go here. He can rotate 1 if he wants to, but he's not going to. Another one here, so he spent 2. 1 more, 3. 1 more, 4. Since he spent 1 movement point, he can rotate 1 hex. He'll do that. And then he's got 1 point left, so he'll move up here. And then he'll also rotate 1 hex. He's got a movement of 7, but he's only has a range of 2. So he'll be going 1, 2, 3, and he can rotate 1 since he spent 1. 4, 5, 6, and he'll park right there. He'll be staying back with the transports here. He'll go 1, 2. He'll stay back here with the transport as well. Just move 1. He's going to actually move up here. So he'll be going 1, 2, 3. And then he's going to expend 2 movement points to go in here. So he gets up to his 5. But then he can rotate 2. Since he spent 2 to get in that hex. Right here. Then he'll get in range. One, 2. And then similarly these will move up as well. He'll stay back here. He'll come over here a bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These will stay back here to defend the transport. Move in just a little bit. And do combat. First of all, before you do that, you designate what the targets are, and it's obvious because there's only individual targets within range that they'll be firing at, so it's But if you had multiple, you'd have to do that. And it looks like comets can be pretty quick because you look at the range, the firing type, and what you're firing at, and then you roll a dice and see if it's destroyed. With the exception of the Supernova class, those can take 2 hits. So we'll see what's in range here. Just work from the bottom up. The transports can't fire. So Supernova class, range is 4. It's in range, and its arc is 120 degrees, so that's within the range. So a range of 4 to a Supernova class. It's not possible to hit him, so don't roll a die. Here, he's out of range. Planetary Cruiser, range is 2, so he's in range. So to Supernova, in a range of 1, needs a 1. Nope. He's out of range. He's in range. Supernova to Planet class at a range of 4, needs a 1. Nope. Range of 2. Nope. Planet class to planet class, he's out of range. Look over here, he's in range. Supernova, range of 2. And since Supernova class can take 2 hits, we'll replace that more powerful counter with a less powerful one to indicate it's damaged. And then since he's still there, that PC can fire as well. Misses. Then we go to this PC to PC at range of 1, miss. This Supernova to the PC, range of 4, 5, miss. PC to PC, range of 1. Hit, destroyed. And then since there's nothing for him to fire at, he won't. And the Empire player doesn't have any ground movement yet, so won't do that. Then I go to space movement for the Ythri. They're going to try to regroup around Avalon a little bit because they're a little bit overwhelmed there. So they're going to move their ships back here and rely on their satellites to see if they can take out some of the guys. So he'll move 5, and then he'll rotate a bit here. So I think that'll be within a 120 degree arc there. He'll go spend 2 movement points. So 1, 2, 5, 6, 7. So he's damaged. He's just going to stay there and take on that PC. He'll stay there and take on that PC. In combat, first of all we'll do the warships, and we'll see if any ground satellites are in range. He can't fire back here, but his arc is here, so range of 3 to an SN. 1. SN to SN. So he's damaged. Replace him with a damaged unit. Set a range. Come to the ground satellites next. So his target will be the PC, range of 1. 3. SN to PC, hit. PC to PC, range of 1. 2. Take him off. Guardian satellites can fire 4 Hexes, and any direction, and they can do it twice. Unfortunately, both of them are beyond force, they can't fire. And there's no ground movement yet. And since there's no surface efforts going on, we move the Morgana and the satellite. Morgana goes 3 hexes clockwise. And the Guardian satellites go 3 hexes counterclockwise. Then we'll go to, then we indicate turn is advanced, and we go the next turn. So I think the transport's got to get down there, so they're going to kind of shoot for that gap between the Guardian satellites. We'll try to all go in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5. One. And they'll be aware of the Guardian satellite, but just try to get in past him. I'll try to sneak behind him. 1. Move his ships in. Just gonna use damage, but he'll see what he can do. 3. I'm going to try to get these guys in. And support him with these troops, these ships. He's going to go after the Guardian satellite. Combat, we're from bottom up, see what's in range here. He's at a range. Range at a range. PC to SN is in range. Unfortunately, he can't hit a SN at 2, so we will roll. He's going to go against Guardian Satellite. Misses. He'll go against the PC. Needs a 1, 2, or 3. Hits. That's removed. Then over here, he's in range, SN to SN. Distance of 1. 1 or 2? Nope. Zone fire. SN to GS in a range of 1. Needs a 1. Barely. SN to PC, range of 3. Needs a 1. Gets him. He doesn't have anything far at. He's out of range. So the Ythri are probably going to have to rely on the satellites to take these guys out, but they have a couple ships yet, and they're going to try to go for the transports. So we'll go 1, 2, 5. And then he'll go after this transport. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're going to be right on top of the transport. So hopefully they'll get a couple. So an SN to a transport. He had a range of 1. Is it 1, 2, or 3? Took him out. They lost 6 bounce troops. Combat strength of 6 bounce troops. That's successful for him. And at a range of 0, they need a 1 through 4. We're able to take them out. They lost another 6 bounce troops, so pretty successful there. And then no ground combat, and then moving the various satellites again. Now they're really going to try to get those transports in there and see what they can do. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's going to be coming down here, so it's probably not wise. They're going to... They probably got to stay back, because they're going to go right in his path if they do that. They'll kind of go down here instead. These ones will move in though. 1, 2, 3. Actually, they're going to kind of count on these guys taking out this satellite, so we'll see what happens. They're going to gang up on this satellite. These guys are going to come in. These satellites, these ships will target this one. She's going to go up here. Then we'll do combat. PC to SN, range of 2. No. SN to SN, range of 2. Hits. Replaced him with a damaged one. And let's say he announced previously he's attacking this one. You should announce your targets prior to combat. Range of 4. Misses. Out of range. Now we have all these going here. So SN to a GS, a range of 2. It's a 1. Oh, that successfully took him out. It's a big deal. Over here, he's attacking him. SN, range of 3, miss. They have several hoarding here on the ground satellite. We'll do the ones, a couple SNs right on top of them there at range of 0. So range of 0. Need a 1, 2, or 3. Got him. So they took out the satellites. So they got straight shot now into getting to the planet. So in the Ythri are to go. They're gonna just try to take as many transports as they can, I guess. Over here, got a movement of 3. Be right on top of him. It's got a range of 3. I don't know if he'll get too far. As far as he can go. Everything's out of range for him, but he's right on top of a transport. And he will ascend to transport 1 to 4. Took him out. No ground combat yet, so there's no killer satellites to move, but Morgana moves. So getting into Terran player movement here. So I'm going to see if they can get some transports down now. So these will be able to get down. And these will go to finish off, hopefully, these other. And we'll get into combat. First of all, we'll go over here. So an SN versus an SN, range of 1. He's a 1 or 2. Nope. Range of 4. Can't hit. Looks like that one escaped. Here SN to SN, range of 2. Miss, range of 3. Miss, so he's been fortunate in surviving. Then we'll get to the Disembark Phase for the transports that have landed over here. So this is what it looks like on the Avalon board then. He coming on the island here. here in C, AT in B, and AT in A. And they can't move this turn. And the Ythri, they still have a couple units up here in the space map, so they'll do what they can to try to get transports again. You can only go 3, so I'm going to send a transport range of 3. Misses. Send a PC range of 1. Misses. And then we'll go on to their surface phase. So actually with the transports, the Bones troops ended up here because the D corresponds to the space map and the hemispheric troops are here. So in the Ythri move is they're trying to fight off this first wave of Terran invaders. So in my interpretation on rules, it looks like air units can attack ground units and other air units, but it doesn't seem like ground units like, Bones troops or militia can attack air units. So I'm going to go with that. And if that's not correct, let me know and we'll call the house rule. So we're going to move in on here, and of course the air units control the entire megahex there. So and the movement allowance is in megahexes, so we can move 3 megahexes. You go 1, 2, 3 to engage in that air unit. But he's going to go in this megahex and engage that bounce troop. He'll engage this air unit. He can't quite make it there. But he'll so we have a couple of battles. We have the air troop here going against the bounce troop. And he's the attacker, so the ratio is 1 to 2. Roll the die. 4. No result. Up here we have a air troop versus another air troop. It's 1 to 1. 6. Defender loses 1 and retreats 1. Can't retreat off the map though. And then we'll reduce that by 1. The result is he drops down to a 2-3 instead of a 3-3. Then we also have a combat over here. An AT versus an AT. 4. No result. Then we advance to turn. Move Morgana. And then move the ships. I'm pretty sure they're going to be able to take out the remaining forces here that will just pile up. And be able to also move transports in. Several S1, 3, yes, so he is destroyed. Several SNs versus SN, destroyed. And then several transports to be landing. We'll have several troops in these locations. So those transport troops have landed. And they can't move this turn. I will indicate the ones that can move, the ones that dropped previously by having those go upside down so I can to differentiate. So I'm going to have this AT go over to this region. I have this BT. I'll have this bounce troop go to the City X. And I'll turn them right side up once I get them in there. This AT will battle this AT. He'll battle this AT. So that's all the battles we got going on. So here it's AT to AT 1-1. The attacker is Imperial. 6. Defender loses 1, retreats 1. So we'll replace him. The 2-3 and then retreat him a Meg Hex. Which, you know, is anywhere in this Mega Hex, so I just happen to put him here. Then the battle over here, 2 to 3. It's on to 1 to 2. 1. So attacker loses 2, so he's gone. Lost a little bit of air superiority there, unfortunately. And then if there's other air units in here, you'd have to attack air units, but there's none, so we can attack the ground troops, since they're in the same Mega Hex. So 6-2, ratio of 3-1, attacker. 6. Defender loses 3, and has to retreat 2. He only has 2, so he's gone. And down here we have a situation where a bounce troop with 6 is attacking a Ythri militia, and they're on a base hex. So when you're defending on a base, you add the either atmospheric or ground defense, depending on what's attacking. And since ground defense units are going at it here, use the ground defense, which is a 2nd. So it'd be a 2 plus 2 for the defense, and then a 6 for the attacking. So it would be 6 to 4, or see, you round it down in the defender's favor, so it'd be a 1-1. Three. No result. So that's the Ythri from Metagaming Concepts in 1975. It's a simple game. I mean, I do like the sketches. I wouldn't say the sketches are simple. They're well done, just not colored. But the components, you know, it's from 1975, so they reflect that time. I like that it has, you know, the space and then the land. I kind of wish there was kind of more interaction between the two, because it kind of plays like, oh, you're doing the space phase and then you're doing, you know, the ground phase. They're like kind of two separate things. I mean, I know there's a little bit of overlap, but it'd be nice if they were kind of more intertwined. And I'm sure with some of the optional rules, that's probably more the case. So I like it. The play is kind of simple and quick, which, I mean, there's a lot to be said for simplicity. That's fine. And I'll definitely play it again. It's a unique game. I like that it's based on a, you know, science fiction novel, to kind of give it all that background flavor of, you can read a book and play the game. That's pretty neat. I'll give it a 6. Thanks a lot.